So first, I would like to thank Boaz and thank the Atlas Committee for bringing us again, finally, for the Atlas Award of 2020. In this talk, I want to describe a little bit of our journey at Karyopharm and what does it mean to be entrepreneur in drug development. And essentially, what's the formula of making a drug, starting from an idea and getting the drug approved. First, let's see if I can handle this laptop. Clearly not. Hey, you should stop the time. It's not fair. So what we see here is the idea that I had at the beginning, which is our drug that is called Expovio or selinexor on the left, and actually all the way that now we have a package that patients with cancer, with certain types of cancer, are getting from the doctor. This is in 50 countries, including the US and Israel. And I think Ido already mentioned that drug development is an extremely long process. And we will talk about the timing of all of it. But what we need to remember that when you go on a journey like that, it is always all about the patient. So I thought instead of starting at the beginning, I'll start with the end and show you the impact that a new drug can make on the life of one patient. In this case, this was a young patient, 34 years old, from Canada, that had a disease called multiple myeloma, which is a type of blood cancer. It's usually a disease that we see our patients have a median age of about 70 years old, but she was very young. She has 2 young children. When she got diagnosed, her baby was less than 1 year. She got certain types of chemotherapy and therapies for her first and second round. Each one of them was about a year, which is a super aggressive disease, since usually these kinds of therapy work for about 5 years. Her disease was growing in her back, and she suffered from terrible back pain. She was bedbound or in a wheelchair all the time. And then for her third round, she joined one of our clinical studies, our new clinical studies, and received selinexor or Expovio in combination with 2 other drugs. And after the first month, her tumor began to shrink, and this had an immediate effect on her pain in her back. And we can also measure it in her blood test. And then she began to walk again. And in the last report, and we had the opportunity to actually interview her and share it with our employee, she's feeling well. She can take her kids to the park. She can live normal life. And we hope that the drug will continue to help her for many more months than a year. But when you hear a story like that, and we did share it with the employees, this keeps you going for this long journey that we discussed. And this puts the motivation. And this is the dream that I always had when I started it, is to meet and talk to a patient that receives selinexor and is alive because of the work that we are doing. Okay, so now let's go back to the beginning. And so what is this formula? And I'll mention it a few times because we need to think. When you start to think about it and you hear, and biotech is an industry, or drug development is an industry of failure. We will talk about the chances, but the chance from beginning to end is less than 1% to get your drug approved. And the first one I read and ran, I was young to understand. I was 14 years old. But when the second time I read it, it was Michael who made me read it again. And this sentence about vision, purpose, and self-esteem, which is what takes an entrepreneur to be successful in his journey, especially in drug development, I think really resonated with me. And I'll talk a little bit about this in this talk. But let's go back first to cancer. Cancer touches all of us. 1 out of 6 deaths in the US is now of cancer. And we believe that in this year, we will have in the US only 600,000 patients that will die from cancer. So when we are looking at a company, And I had the idea in 2009, and I got the drug approved in 2019. So that was a short journey of 10 years, and when it sounds maybe funny when I'm saying it, but this is a short journey when you speak about drug development. I should say that we got the approval from the FDA in July 3rd. Everybody was home, went to their July 4th, and we were still sitting there hoping to get this letter from FDA. And when you get a drug approval from FDA, you think you got something bad because they don't say anything nice to you. They just send you a letter, and we need to read all the small letters to understand, hey, they really approved the drug. So we went home, and the fireworks was all. It was one of the best feelings of my life. But let's go back and talk a little bit about what does it mean to develop a new drug. So when we develop drugs, we usually start from identifying a protein that we want to work on, and then you try to find drugs, which I always think about them as a lock and key. So the protein is the lock, and then you want to find a smart key. And usually try many, many keys. In this case, usually you start with 50,000 to 5 million compounds. I did all of this in silico, which is one of the ways to save time. So instead of going to the lab, we do it on the computer. But if you start from this screening and you get something that inhibits your protein or works on your protein, and you start from all this, and at the end you get 12 compounds that have activity, and then you get 9 of them into clinical trials. At the end, you get one drug that gets approved. So if we look at the success rate, it's extremely, extremely small. And you have to have that in mind, and that's part of this resilience that we talk a lot about it in our company. And I think is one of the most important quality of an entrepreneur. Okay, I'll do a little bit of science. There was a test, but I have to go quickly through this. So 2 minutes about how this works. This is the nucleus, and this is where the DNA sits, and we can think about it as our safe. We don't want anything to happen to it. So we have a gatekeeper that makes sure that only good things happening in the nucleus and non-activity that we don't want are happening there. Cancer does a very smart thing. They eliminate the gatekeeper. And then even if the DNA is not okay and mutated and everything bad happened, the cell can continue to proliferate against our evolution that's supposed to identify that this is a cancer cell. So it doesn't look like that, our gatekeeper. I'll get that. How does it look in real life is that this is a picture of this nucleus, and these are the pores. So nature made sure that only what needs to go in goes in. And these pores are not just holes. They are filled with very, very smart filters that allow only certain things to go in and certain things to go out. That's how they look. And these are the proteins that want to go in. And only if they are the right protein in the right time, they will go in. So it's one of the most complicated systems that we have in our body. But cancer, which is smarter than all of us together, found how to control this and let everything in and out in an uncontrolled way. And that was my idea. Let's restore the ability of the cell to decide what goes into the nucleus or not, and then it will identify this is a cancer cell and will cause cancer cell death. And that's what we did. We work on a protein that controls this movement between the nucleus and the cytoplasm and make sure that only the right proteins go in the right time and go out in the right time. And if it find out that there is a cancer, it kills the cells. And that's what I describe as the idea. That only takes about 1 minute of good thinking. Then times fly by, and you have 3 years, and you finally get a compound, and you can put it in mice and hope to God that it will end to nature, I should say, that something good will happen, or to the gods of chemistry. And what we see here is that these are mice that had leukemia, and we can see that on day 35 they are full with cancer, and this is really, it's in the liver, in the brain, everywhere. But if we treat them with selinexor, which is the 2 bottom row, there is no cancer. Now, the goal is not to cure mice, the goal was to cure people. And here I show you one of our first patients with lymphoma, and you can see how much lymphoma was spread up in his body, but when we treated him with selinexor, what we see is almost elimination of all his cancer. This patient lived for 6 years, and he was just unfortunately died after 6 years, but we did give him 6 years of life. I do want to talk about one thing I know I'm out of time, but I'll steal a minute, and I'll talk that when you develop it, and I think we touched it, you have extreme innovation at the beginning, and then you go and you work in the most regulated system in the world. Not only if you're public, you have the SEC, you also have the FDA, you have the hospitals, you have the Helsinki Committee, you have everybody making sure that you'll do a good job. And sometimes they even tell you no. We were in the ODAC, which is like the TV shows of approvals, and the FDA and Love TV, and the professor said, do not approve the drug. I tell you, to come out after this moment, it wasn't easy, but the patient believed us, and we believed that we knew that these drugs help patients, and the FDA listened, and they approved the drug 3 months after that. We gave them more information, and they approved it. And this is because you always need to fight. You need to continue to fight. I'll skip all of that, and I'll just want to finish that. I think for entrepreneurs, it's about a dream. And our dreams are actually the dreams of our patient. And we know that when you give a patient, sometimes a month, sometimes 3, sometimes a year, you give them time is life events. It's a graduation of the grandchildren. It's a wedding. It's another dinner with friends. It's another birthday. And every time it's hard, we go back to this, and we bring patients into the company to tell the story, so we get the energy to move forward. And the values that we share in the company are very similar to the value that Ayn Rand speak of, and the value that help us go through the day. Innovation by itself is not enough. You have to be courageous. You have to say to the FDA, I want you to listen to me, even if they don't. Same for the doctors, same for the hospitals sometimes. Same sometimes for your own employees. You have to have the urgency, because cancer doesn't stop over the weekend. They continue to divide. And that's what we keep saying to our amazing team. Not always do they listen, but I think they understand. You have to be resilient even in the tough part. And very importantly, you have to have energy, because any new innovation, any new company, until you get to the moment that and it never ends, especially in oncology, that you have to continue to develop and move forward. So that's, so what's the formula to create a new drug? We need to have a good idea, that's just the beginning, and we need to dream about it. We need to share our vision and get the people that are involved, including investors, including investigators, to share with us their results, and we need to be able to push forward. My sister told me, and somehow we missed it in this presentation, that you also need to be crazy. So she's here, and with that I will finish, that with all these values, without a little bit of craziness, I don't think we would get to where we are. Thank you.